After 60, your body doesn't break down by accident. It breaks down by design, and that design was never meant to include the sitting, the stillness, the small, careful movements most of us default to once we hit retirement age. There's a reason 99% of American seniors avoid the one Japanese exercise that rewires aging at the cellular level, and it isn't because they don't want to feel better. It's because everything in our culture tells us that after a certain age, intensity is dangerous, that pushing yourself is reckless, that the smart move is to play it safe and slow. But here's what the research is starting to scream from the rooftops. Playing it safe might be the riskiest thing you can do. In Japan, people over 60 routinely outlive their American counterparts by years, sometimes decades, and they do it with sharper minds, stronger bones, and cardiovascular systems that look 20 years younger on the inside. The difference isn't genetics. It's not diet alone. It's a single movement practice most of them do every single day. A practice that takes less than 4 minutes, requires no equipment, and activates something in your muscle fibers that no supplement, no drug, and no gentle yoga class can touch. Yet, if you walk into any American gym or senior center, you'll see the exact opposite. Machines that isolate single muscles, chairs that support your weight, instructors who tell you to take it easy and listen to your body, which usually means stop before anything gets uncomfortable. The truth buried in the science is this: your body after 60 needs intensity more than it needs rest. It needs challenge more than it needs comfort. And the Japanese have known this for generations, built it into their daily routines, made it as normal as brushing your teeth. Meanwhile, here in the States, we've been sold a story that aging means slowing down, that your heart rate should stay in some mythical safe zone, that anything that makes you breathe hard or sweat or shake a little is a warning sign to back off. But what if that story is killing us softly, one cautious year at a time? I'm going to walk you through exactly why this one exercise works, what happens inside your cells when you do it, why American medicine has overlooked it for so long, and how you can start today, even if you haven't broken a sweat in 20 years. I'm also going to show you the 2 biggest mistakes people make when they finally try it, mistakes that turn a 4-minute breakthrough into a waste of time, or worse, an injury that sets you back months. And at the very end, I'll give you the modified version that lets you build up safely, the one that meets you where you are right now and takes you where you need to be. Before we go further, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from and how old you are right now. I want to see how many of us are in this together, because the more voices we have, the harder it is for the old narratives to keep drowning out the truth. Let's start with what actually happens to your body after 60 when you avoid intensity. Your mitochondria, the tiny power plants inside every cell, start to shut down. Not because they're worn out, but because they're not being asked to do anything hard. Mitochondria are like employees. If you never challenge them, they clock out early. They stop showing up. They retire on the job. When that happens, your cells produce less energy, your muscles shrink faster, your brain gets foggier, and your metabolic rate drops off a cliff. This is called mitochondrial dysfunction, and it's one of the primary drivers of what we call aging. But here's the kicker. Mitochondrial dysfunction is reversible, and the fastest way to reverse it is through short bursts of high-intensity effort that force those little power plants to wake up and multiply. In some analyses, adults over 60 who engage in brief, intense exercise, just 2 or 3 times a week, show mitochondrial activity comparable to people in their 20s. Their cells are literally younger on the inside. Meanwhile, peers who stick to low-intensity walking or stretching see mitochondrial decline continue at the expected rate, which means they're aging on schedule while the others are rewinding the clock. The Japanese exercise I'm about to describe is built on this principle: maximum effort for minimum time, followed by complete rest, repeated until your body has no choice but to adapt. The exercise is called taiso, specifically a form of it known as Ragyo Taiso when done to music. But the core element that makes it anti-aging isn't the music or the routine. It's the inclusion of what the Japanese call Zenryoku Undo, which translates to all-out movement. Zenryoku Undo means you move as fast and as powerfully as your body can manage for a very short window, usually 10 to 20 seconds, and then you rest completely. You do this in cycles, and the whole session lasts no more than 4 minutes. It sounds simple, but the physiological impact is staggering. When you go all out, even for just a few seconds, you create a cascade of signals in your muscle tissue that tells your genes to start producing more mitochondria, more enzymes that burn fat, more proteins that protect your joints, and more growth factors that keep your brain cells alive and connected. Here's why 99% of American seniors avoid it. It feels hard. It makes you breathe like you just climbed a flight of stairs. Your heart rate spikes. You might feel a little dizzy the first time. And everything in our medical culture has conditioned us to interpret those sensations as danger, as your body telling you to stop. But those sensations aren't danger. They're adaptation. They're your body doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is respond to a challenge by getting stronger. The real danger is the absence of challenge, the slow, comfortable decline that feels safe right up until you can't get out of a chair without help or your balance fails you on a wet sidewalk. Let me tell you about Barbara. She's 67, a retired librarian from Ohio, loved her grandkids but couldn't keep up with them at the park anymore. She'd get winded walking from the car to the playground, and every time she bent down to pick up a toy, her knees would ache for hours. Her doctor told her to walk more, maybe try water aerobics, keep it gentle. She did that for 2 years and felt exactly the same, maybe a little worse. Then a friend who'd spent time in Japan mentioned Taiso and sent her a video. Barbara was skeptical, but she tried it in her living room one morning, just 4 minutes, moving as fast as she could through a simple sequence of arm swings, knee lifts, and squat pulses. She felt her heart pound and thought she'd made a mistake. But she didn't fall, didn't hurt anything. And by the time she caught her breath, she felt awake in a way she hadn't in years. She did it again the next day, and the day after that. 2 weeks later, she was playing tag with her grandkids and laughing so hard she cried, "So what exactly do you do?" The traditional Ragyo Taiso has a set sequence, but you don't need to memorize choreography. You need to understand the principle. Move every major joint through its full range of motion, as vigorously as you can for short bursts. Then rest. Start standing if you're able, feet shoulder width apart. First burst, 20 seconds. Swing your arms in big circles forward, then reverse as fast as you can manage. Let your torso twist a little. Let your shoulders roll. Wake up your spine. Rest for 10 seconds. Just breathe. Second burst, 20 seconds. March in place, lifting your knees as high as you safely can, pumping your arms. If balance is an issue, hold the back of a chair with one hand and do it anyway. Rest 10 seconds. Third burst, 20 seconds, shallow squat pulses, just a few inches down and up, moving quickly, keeping your weight in your heels. If squats aren't available, do seated knee lifts, fast and deliberate. Rest 10 seconds. Fourth burst, 20 seconds, alternating side bends, reaching one arm overhead and leaning to the opposite side, then switching, quick and rhythmic. Rest 10 seconds, that's one round. Do 2 or 3 rounds total, and you've just completed a session. The key is the speed and the effort. You're not trying to look graceful. You're trying to spike your heart rate and challenge your muscles in a compressed time frame so your body has to respond. If you can talk easily while you're doing the bursts, you're not going hard enough. If you feel like you might pass out, you're going too hard. The sweet spot is breathless but controlled, intense but safe. And here's the safety note. If you have uncontrolled high blood pressure, recent surgery, or any condition your doctor has told you makes exertion risky, you need to get clearance first. This isn't reckless. It's intentional stress applied in a way that builds resilience, but you have to know your baseline. Now, here's the part that makes people stumble. Mistake number 1. They do the movements, but they don't go fast enough to actually trigger the adaptation response. They're cautious, they pace themselves, and they end up with a light warm-up instead of a stimulus. The whole point is to challenge your cardiovascular system and your muscle fibers beyond what they're used to. If you don't push into discomfort even briefly, nothing changes. Mistake number 2, they go so hard on day 1 that they hurt themselves or get so sore they quit. You have to start where you are. If you haven't done anything intense in years, your first session might be half the speed and half the rounds I described, and that's perfect. You'll still get a benefit. You'll build from there. Progress is measured in weeks, not minutes. Here's what happens if you do this consistently, 3 times a week for a month. Your mitochondria start multiplying. Studies from major research institutions have shown that even older adults can increase mitochondrial density by significant margins with short, intense intervals. Your VO2 max, which is your body's ability to use oxygen and one of the most reliable predictors of lifespan, starts to climb. Your insulin sensitivity improves, meaning your cells get better at pulling sugar out of your blood, which lowers your risk of diabetes and cognitive decline. Your balance improves because the fast, dynamic movements force your nervous system to coordinate in real time. And your mood lifts because intense effort triggers endorphin release and a neurochemical cocktail that fights depression better than most medications. But there's a deeper reason this works and why it matters specifically after 60. As you age, your body becomes more efficient at conserving energy, which sounds like a good thing but is actually a metabolic trap. It downregulates systems you're not using, shuts off expensive processes like muscle repair and immune surveillance, prioritizes survival over thriving. Intensity is the signal that tells your body you still need those systems, that you're not done, that it's worth investing resources in keeping you strong and sharp. Without that signal, your body assumes you're winding down and it obliges. With that signal, even for 4 minutes a few times a week, your body gets the message. We're still in the game. Let me tell you about Raymond. He's 71, a retired mechanic from Texas, loved his workshop, but started feeling like his hands were getting weaker, his grip not what it used to be. He blamed arthritis, figured it was just part of getting older. His daughter, who's a physical therapist, pushed him to try something more vigorous than his usual slow walks. He resisted at first, thought she was being reckless, but she showed him the research on intensity and aging, and he agreed to try Taiso for 2 weeks. He did it in his garage, 3 mornings a week, moving as fast as his body would allow through the sequences. The first few sessions were rough, he admitted. His heart hammered, his legs shook, and he wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. But he didn't hurt anything, and by the end of week 1, he noticed his hands felt steadier, his grip stronger when he picked up a wrench. By the end of week 2, he was back to working on small engine repairs, projects he'd abandoned months earlier because they felt too frustrating. He kept going, and 3 months later, he told his daughter he felt like he'd gotten a decade back. Now, let's talk about progression, because this isn't a one-size routine you do forever. Once the basic sequence feels manageable, you add complexity or resistance. Maybe you hold light dumbbells during the arm swings, even just 2 or 3 pounds. Maybe you add a jump or a hop to the march if your joints allow it. Maybe you increase the number of rounds from 2 to 4. The principle stays the same, short bursts of maximum effort, followed by rest, but you scale the challenge to keep your body guessing. If it gets easy, it stops working. Your body adapts to easy. It only transforms under pressure. There's also a mental component that nobody talks about. When you do something hard, even for 20 seconds, and you finish it without collapsing or failing, you prove to yourself that you're capable of more than you thought. That confidence bleeds into the rest of your life. You take stairs instead of elevators. You carry your own groceries. You say yes to activities you would have declined before. This is the psychological edge of intensity training. It rewrites the story you tell yourself about what your body can do. Here's a question to test your current state. Can you stand up from a chair without using your hands? Not just once, but 10 times in a row quickly? If you can't, or if it's a struggle, your lower body strength is in the danger zone. That's the strength you need to avoid falls, to get off the toilet, to live independently. Taiso directly addresses this because the squat pulses and knee lifts build exactly those muscles. And because it's done at speed, it also trains your nervous system to fire those muscles fast, which is what saves you when you trip on a rug or lose your footing on ice. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. Why doesn't American medicine push this? Why do senior fitness programs focus on gentle stretching and seated exercises when the evidence for intensity is so strong? Part of it is liability. High-intensity anything sounds risky, and no one wants to be sued when someone gets hurt. Part of it is cultural. We've built an entire industry around the idea that aging equals fragility, and fragility requires caution. Products, services, therapies, all marketed on the premise that you need to be careful, protected, managed. Intensity doesn't fit that model. Intensity says you're tougher than you think, and that's not a message that sells grab bars and medical alert systems. But the science doesn't care about marketing. The science says that carefully applied stress, the kind that makes you breathe hard and sweat a little, is one of the most powerful longevity tools we have. Let me tell you about Linda. She's 64, a former nurse from Michigan, always prided herself on staying active. Did yoga 3 times a week, walked her dog every morning, but she noticed her energy was tanking. She'd get tired by mid-afternoon, and her weight was creeping up no matter what she ate. Her doctor ran tests, everything came back normal, told her it was just aging. She wasn't satisfied with that answer. A friend mentioned Taiso after reading about it online, and Linda decided to try it for a month. She did the 4-minute routine every other morning before her walk, moving as fast as she could through the sequences. The first week was humbling. She realized how much she'd been coasting in her yoga classes. By week 2, she felt a shift. Her energy held through the afternoon. By week 3, her jeans fit better. By the end of the month, she'd lost 6 pounds without changing her diet, and she felt stronger than she had in 5 years. She kept going, and 6 months later, she was leading a small Taiso group in her neighborhood, teaching other seniors the same routine that had given her life back. So here's the protocol, broken down step by step. Find a space where you can move freely, ideally with something sturdy nearby to grab if you lose balance. Set a timer for 4 minutes. Start with a 10-second warm-up. Just march in place gently. Swing your arms. Wake up your joints. Then begin your first 20-second burst. Arm circles forward as fast as you can. Rest 10 seconds. Breathe. Second burst, march in place, high knees, fast pace. Rest 10 seconds. Third burst, squat pulses or seated knee lifts, quick and controlled. Rest 10 seconds. Fourth burst, side bends, alternating, quick and rhythmic. Rest 10 seconds. That's one round, about 90 seconds. Repeat the sequence until your 4 minutes are up, which gives you 2 to 3 rounds depending on your rest periods. When you're done, walk around slowly for a minute or 2 to cool down. Don't just sit. Let your heart rate come down gradually. Do this 3 times a week every other day. Monday, Wednesday, Friday works. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday works. The key is consistency and recovery. Your body needs the stimulus, but it also needs time to adapt. If you do it every single day, you'll overtrain and risk injury. If you do it once a week, you won't get the cumulative benefit. 3 times a week is the sweet spot that research supports. Now, let's talk about modifications for different starting points. If you're dealing with knee pain, skip the squat pulses and do seated leg extensions instead, straightening one leg out fast, then the other, back and forth. If shoulder mobility is limited, reduce the range on the arm circles, but keep the speed. If balance is a concern, do the entire routine seated in a sturdy chair. You'll still get a cardiovascular and muscular challenge. The movement pattern matters less than the effort level. You're looking for that 20-second window where your body is working hard, your breath is coming fast, and your muscles are firing at capacity. Here's the thing about adaptation that most people misunderstand. Your body doesn't get stronger during the exercise. It gets stronger during the recovery after the exercise when it's repairing the tiny stress signals you created. That's why rest days are not optional. That's why sleep matters. That's why nutrition matters. You're not just doing 4 minutes of movement. You're triggering a 48-hour process of cellular repair and upgrade. If you undermine that process by not sleeping or not eating enough protein, you'll negate the benefit. Think of the exercise as the spark and the recovery as the fire. You need both. Let me tell you about George. He's 69, a retired teacher from Florida, loved fishing, but found himself too tired to make the drive to his favorite spot most weekends. He'd sit in his recliner, watch TV, tell himself he'd go next time. His wife got worried, pushed him to see a doctor who ran a cardiac stress test and said his heart was fine, but his fitness level was poor for his age. The doctor recommended a supervised exercise program, but George didn't want to join a gym or a class. His wife found a video on Taiso, showed it to him, and he agreed to try it at home. He did it in his living room 3 mornings a week, just 4 minutes. The first session left him gasping, and he thought maybe the doctor was wrong, maybe his heart wasn't fine. But he didn't feel pain, just effort, and he tried again 2 days later. By the end of the first month, he was driving to the lake every Saturday, staying out for hours, coming home tired in a good way. 6 months in, he'd lost 15 pounds, his resting heart rate had dropped, and his doctor was stunned at the improvement in his numbers. George told him about Taiso, and the doctor wrote it down, said he'd mention it to other patients. Here's the science behind why this works better than long, slow cardio. When you go all out for 20 seconds, you create what's called an oxygen debt. Your muscles demand more oxygen than your cardiovascular system can deliver in that moment, so they switch to anaerobic metabolism, which produces energy without oxygen, but also produces lactate. That lactate isn't the enemy. It's a signal molecule that tells your body to make adaptations, build more capillaries to deliver oxygen faster, produce more mitochondria to generate energy more efficiently, strengthen the heart to pump more blood with each beat. Long, slow cardio doesn't create that same signal. It's comfortable, sustainable, and your body doesn't see any reason to change. Intensity, even in short doses, forces change. This is also why Taiso is particularly effective for fat loss after 60. As you age, your body becomes more resistant to traditional calorie restriction diets. Your metabolic rate slows, your hormones shift, and losing weight feels almost impossible. But high-intensity intervals change your metabolic rate for hours after the workout ends. You burn more calories at rest because your body is busy repairing and rebuilding. Some research suggests the afterburn effect can last up to 24 hours. You do 4 minutes of work and your metabolism stays elevated for a full day. That's efficiency you can't get from an hour of walking. Now, let's address fear, because fear is the #1 barrier. You're afraid you'll hurt yourself. You're afraid your heart will give out. You're afraid you'll look foolish or fail. Those fears are valid, but they're also based on outdated assumptions. Your heart is a muscle, and like any muscle, it gets stronger when you challenge it. The risk of a cardiac event during exercise is real but statistically tiny, especially if you've been cleared by a doctor and you start gradually. The risk of not exercising, of letting your cardiovascular system decay from disuse, is far greater. You're more likely to have a heart attack, shoveling snow or climbing stairs after years of inactivity, than you are during a controlled 4-minute session where you're paying attention to how you feel. Here's a simple test to know if you're overdoing it. If you feel chest pain, stop immediately. If you feel dizzy and it doesn't resolve after sitting down for a minute, stop and call your doctor. If you feel nauseous or like you might faint, you've pushed too hard. But if you just feel out of breath, if your legs are shaky, if you're sweating and your heart is pounding, that's normal. That's your body working. You recover, you adapt, you get stronger. The line between challenge and danger is clear once you learn to read your own signals, and most people find that line is much further out than they thought. Let me tell you about Diane. She's 72, a retired accountant from Oregon. Always considered herself careful and methodical. Never took unnecessary risks. She'd been walking for exercise, but her bone density scan came back showing early osteoporosis, and her doctor recommended weight-bearing exercise. Diane didn't know what that meant or how to start. A friend mentioned Taiso, said it was weight-bearing because you're moving your body against gravity at speed. Diane watched a video, felt intimidated, but decided to try it once. She did a modified version, slower bursts, longer rests, only 2 rounds. It was harder than she expected, but she finished, and nothing broke. She tried again 3 days later, and again 3 days after that. After a month, she repeated her bone density scan as part of a research study she'd enrolled in, and the results showed a small improvement. Her doctor was surprised, said it usually takes 6 months to a year to see any change. Diane kept going, and a year later, her bone density had moved out of the osteoporosis range entirely. She was doing full-intensity Taiso, 4 rounds, 3 times a week, and she felt invincible. Here's the habit-stacking strategy that makes this stick. Don't treat it as a separate new thing you have to remember. Attach it to something you already do every day. If you drink coffee every morning, do Taiso right before or right after your first cup. If you watch the morning news, do it during the commercial break. If you feed your pets at the same time every day, do it right before you put the food down. The movement itself is only 4 minutes, so the barrier isn't time. The barrier is remembering and prioritizing. When you stack it onto an existing habit, it becomes automatic. There's also a social element that can amplify the benefit. If you can find even one other person to do this with you, your consistency will double. You hold each other accountable. You encourage each other on hard days, and there's something about shared effort that makes it more bearable. It doesn't have to be in person. You can do it over a video call, or you can just text each other when you finish. The point is to build a structure that supports the behavior until the behavior becomes its own reward. Now, let's talk about what happens after 3 months, after 6 months, after a year. The changes compound. Your cardiovascular fitness keeps improving. Your muscle mass stabilizes or even increases, which is almost unheard of after 60 without resistance training. Your balance and coordination sharpen because the fast dynamic movements keep your nervous system sharp. Your mental clarity improves because your brain is getting better blood flow and more oxygen. And perhaps most importantly, your confidence in your own body grows. You stop seeing yourself as fragile. You start seeing yourself as capable, resilient, still adapting, still strong. This is the shift that Japanese culture understands, and American culture resists. Aging isn't a disease. It's not something to manage or mitigate with caution. It's a process that responds to input. If you input challenge, you get strength. If you input comfort, you get decline. The choice is yours, but the window doesn't stay open forever. The longer you wait, the harder it is to start, and the less runway you have to enjoy the benefits. Here's the final piece, the one that ties it all together. Taiso isn't just about adding years to your life. It's about adding life to your years. It's about being able to play with your grandkids, travel without exhaustion, do the things you love without your body being the limiting factor. It's about independence, dignity, and joy. Those aren't luxuries. They're the whole point, so here's the plan. Tomorrow morning, or whenever you have 4 minutes, you try 1 round. You move as fast as you can through the sequence I described. You rest, you breathe, you notice how it feels. If it's too much, you slow down and do it seated. If it's too easy, you go faster or add a round. You do it again 2 days later. And again 2 days after that. You give yourself a month, just 12 sessions, and you see what changes. My guess is you'll feel something shift before the month is over, and that shift will be enough to keep you going. Which part of this are you most curious about? And what's the first movement you'll try? Drop a comment and let me know, because your story might be the one that convinces someone else to start.